I was treated like an outsider at my wife's friend's dinner, but when I realized I was being cheated out of my place in her life, I turned the tables and exposed the toxic truth behind their glamorous circle. Mark Weston never imagined a single dinner could unravel the life he'd built with Emily, but then again, he'd never fully understood Vanessa Carter's game. At 34, he owned Weston's Wheels, a bike repair and customization shop that hummed with the clatter of tools and the loyalty of customers who trusted his hands. It wasn't glamorous, but it was his own, and at the center of that world was Emily, his wife of 6 years, a 32-year-old data consultant whose quiet strength held them together. Their life had a rhythm Mark cherished. Mornings started with coffee, him brewing, her shuffling downstairs in an oversized sweater, eyes still soft with sleep. They'd talk over mugs, him about a stubborn gear shift, her about a client's endless revisions. Evenings were simpler, him locking up the shop, her stirring something on the stove, their voices weaving through the kitchen. It was a partnership built on small, unspoken things. Her hand on his arm when he grew quiet, his grin when she landed a dry joke. Emily was his anchor, and he was hers. That was enough, until her social circle came into play. Emily's friends were a polished crowd, professionals and socialites who moved in a world of networking brunches and rooftop bars. Mark met them often enough, but he never belonged. They'd ask about his shop with faint curiosity, then pivot to topics he couldn't follow. Insider scandals, trendy hotspots. He'd nod along, feeling like a guest at his own table. And then there was Vanessa Carter, Emily's college friend and the group's unspoken queen, tall, sharp-edged, with a voice that cut through chatter and a smile that didn't warm her eyes. Vanessa was a force Mark couldn't read. She dominated every room, her charm masking something colder, something that set his nerves on edge. Vanessa had known Emily since their late-night study days, a bond Mark respected but never touched. To him, she was a puzzle with missing pieces. She'd toss him backhanded compliments. "Oh, Mark, you're so grounded," her tone sweet enough to dodge reproach, sour enough to sting. The group would laugh and Emily would squeeze his hand, her silent apology. He'd let it slide, for her sake. She'd come home from those nights buzzing, recounting Vanessa's latest quip or a friend's promotion, and Mark would listen, happy to see her happy. But he couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider, tolerated at best, dismissed at worst. Vanessa especially kept him at a distance. She'd invite Emily to exclusive outings, gallery openings, wine tastings, then forget to include him until Emily mentioned it. "Oh, Mark's welcome too, I suppose," she'd say, her smirk barely hidden. Emily brushed it off every time. "She's just intense," she'd insist, her voice soft with loyalty. "She doesn't mean—" Mark wasn't convinced. There was a pattern to Vanessa's slight, a quiet power play he couldn't name without sounding paranoid. So he stayed quiet, letting Emily orbit her friend's world while he held down theirs. His shop was thriving, his marriage solid. Why stir trouble over a woman he could avoid? He told himself it didn't matter. He had Emily, her laughter in their kitchen, her steady presence beside him. That was his life, and it was good. But deep down, he knew Vanessa's shadow lingered, a thread waiting to pull loose. He'd built something real with Emily, something worth protecting, and he'd never been one to back down from a fix. What he didn't see coming was how soon that resolve would be tested, or how one night, one invitation would force him to confront the cracks he'd ignored. Mark was tightening a brake cable in the shop when Emily burst through the door, her voice cutting through the hum of his tools. "Vanessa just called. We're invited to Lei Chen." Her eyes sparkled, cheeks flushed with a rare, unguarded thrill. Mark paused, wrench in hand, and forced a smile. Lei Chen was Seattle's crown jewel of French dining, luxe, exclusive, the kind of place where reservations were a status symbol. He knew Vanessa didn't toss out invites like that lightly. He also knew she'd never warmed to him. "Both of us?" he asked, setting the wrench down. Emily nodded, already scrolling her phone for the restaurant's menu. "Friday night, 7 p.m. She's got a private room booked. Isn't that wild?" Her excitement was infectious, but Mark felt a knot tighten in his gut. Vanessa Carter didn't do wild without an angle. In 6 years, she'd never once singled them out for something this grand. Cocktail hours, sure, group brunches where he could fade into the background, fine. But Lei Chen? That was her stage. And Mark had always been a prop at best. He wiped his hands on a rag, buying time. "Sounds fancy. What's the occasion?" Emily shrugged, still engrossed in her screen. "No occasion, I think. Just Vanessa being Vanessa, rounding up the crew for something special." The crew. That meant the usual orbit. The lawyer with the loud laugh, the marketer who name-dropped clients, the socialite who'd once asked Mark if he'd ever considered scaling up his little bike thing, and Vanessa, directing it all like a conductor with a hidden baton. Mark's wariness deepened. "She say anything about me coming?" Emily glanced up, brow furrowing slightly. "Of course you're coming. She said you and Mark." "Why wouldn't you?" Her tone was light, but there was an edge to it, a flicker of defensiveness. Mark hesitated. He could list a dozen reasons: Vanessa's smirks, her pointed exclusions, the way she'd once forgotten to tell him about a group hike until Emily was already packed. But Emily's excitement stopped him cold. She'd been buried in work for weeks, her remote consulting gig draining her with endless data sets. This was her spark, her chance to breathe. He couldn't snuff it out with his suspicions. "Fair enough," he said, managing a grin. "Guess I'll dust off my one nice jacket." Emily laughed, crossing the shop to kiss his cheek. "You'll look great. It's going to be fun, I promise." She darted upstairs to her office, already texting Vanessa back, leaving Mark alone with the half-fizzen bike and his doubts. The week slipped by, and Friday loomed. Mark tried to shake his unease. Maybe he'd misread Vanessa. Maybe this was her olive branch, a chance to reset. But the closer it got, the more his instincts screamed trap. He'd seen her wield kindness like a blade before, inviting Emily to a girls' night that turned into a weekend trip, leaving him to hear about it after the fact. Emily always came back glowing, oblivious to the slight. "She's just spontaneous," she'd say. Mark wasn't buying spontaneous this time. By Friday afternoon, he was second-guessing his tie in their bathroom mirror while Emily zipped around, radiant in a sleek black dress. "You sure I don't look like I'm trying too hard?" he asked, tugging at the knot. She grinned, adjusting it for him. "You look perfect. Stop worrying. They're my friends, not a firing squad." He wanted to believe her. She looped her arm through his as they headed out, her warmth softening his edges. "It's just dinner," she added, squeezing his hand. "Good food, good wine, good company. What's the worst that could happen?" Mark didn't answer. He drove them through Seattle's drizzle, the city lights smearing across the windshield, Le Chen's glowing sign soon looming ahead. Emily chattered about the menu: foie gras, duck confit, some wine she couldn't pronounce, her voice a lifeline against his rising dread. He parked, opened her door, and followed her inside, the restaurant's opulence hitting him like a wave, chandeliers dripping crystal, waiters gliding like ghosts, the air thick with butter and truffles. Vanessa had outdone herself. They stepped into the private room, and there she was, Vanessa, poised at the head of a long table, her red lipstick a slash against her pale skin. "Emily, darling," she called, rising to air-kiss her cheeks. Her gaze slid to Mark, cool and appraising. "And Mark. So glad you could make it." Her smile was all teeth, and the knot in his gut tightened. He scanned the table. 8 chairs, 8 place settings, 8 faces turning to greet them. Emily beamed, oblivious. Mark's heart sank. He should have known. Vanessa's invites never came without a catch. The private room at Le Chen shimmered with wealth: polished wood, flickering candles, a chandelier casting golden flecks across the table. Mark stood beside Emily, her hand still looped through his arm as Vanessa's greeting hung in the air. "So glad you could make it," she'd said. Her voice smooth as silk, her eyes glinting with something Mark couldn't trust. He forced a nod, scanning the setup again. 8 chairs, 8 plates. 8 pairs of eyes now fixed on them. The math didn't add up. Emily tugged him forward, oblivious, her smile wide as she waved at the group. "Hey, everyone!" The lawyer Greg raised a glance. The marketer Claire flashed a grin. The socialite Tara gave a little finger wiggle. Vanessa gestured grandly to the table, her black dress hugging her like armor. "Come, sit. We've been dying to catch up." Emily stepped toward the chairs, but Mark froze, his gaze locking on the scene. 8 settings. No 9th. No place for him. Vanessa," Emily said, her voice faltering as she noticed too. "Is there—" She trailed off, glancing at Mark, then back at the table. Vanessa turned, her expression shifting to mock surprise, wide eyes, a hand to her chest. "Oh goodness, Mark, I didn't even think. There's no extra seat?" She laughed, a sharp tinkling sound that ricocheted off the walls. "Silly me, I must have miscounted. These private rooms are so tricky to book." Mark's jaw tightened. Tricky, right. The group shifted uncomfortably. Greg coughed into his wine. Claire fiddled with her napkin, but no one spoke. Vanessa tilted her head, her smile unwavering. "No worries, though. The bar's just out there. Lovely spot. Great view of the room. You don't mind, do you, Mark?" It wasn't a question. It was a dismissal, wrapped in velvet and delivered with a smirk. He felt the heat crawl up his neck, the weight of every stare pinning him in place. Emily's grip on his arm loosened, her eyes darting between him and Vanessa. "I mean, we could ask for another chair," she started, but her voice was small, swallowed by the room's hum. Vanessa waved a hand. "Oh, don't fuss, Em. They're packed tonight. Mark's fine with it, aren't you?" She locked eyes with him, daring him to push back. Mark's mind raced. He could call her bluff, demand a seat, make a scene. But the group was already settling in, their chatter resuming like he was a ghost fading out. Emily's face flushed, her lips parting as if to argue, but she didn't. She just stood there, caught between him and Vanessa, her silence slicing deeper than any words. He swallowed the burn in his throat. "Sure," he said, voice flat. "Bar's fine." Vanessa's smile widened, triumphant. "Perfect. We'll catch you up later." He turned, legs stiff, and walked out to the bar, a sleek stretch of mahogany just beyond the room's glass partition. The bartender nodded as he slid onto a stool, ordering a whiskey he didn't want. Through the glass, he watched them, Vanessa leaning in to whisper to Emily, Emily nodding faintly, the group laughing at something he couldn't hear. His chest tightened. He'd known Vanessa had a game, but this was surgical, cutting him out while keeping her hands clean. The whiskey burned going down, matching the humiliation simmering in his gut. He replayed it. Vanessa's faux shock, the group's complicity, Emily's failure to fight for him. She'd looked embarrassed, sure, but not enough to stand up, not enough to say, no, he stays. He'd complied to keep the peace, but it didn't erase the sting, or the clarity. This wasn't a mistake. Vanessa had planned it, a power play to remind him where he stood, and Emily, his Emily, had let it happen. He sipped again, eyes narrowing as he studied Vanessa through the glass. She was in her element, gesturing animatedly, her laughter ringing out, the group hanging on her every word. Emily sat beside her, quieter now, her glances flicking toward the bar every few minutes. Guilt, maybe, or confusion. Mark couldn't tell, and that gnawed at him. Worse than the exclusion. He knew Vanessa's type, social dominance was her currency, and she spent it freely. But Emily? She was supposed to be his partner, not a pawn in Vanessa's chess match. The night dragged on. Waiters swept in with plates foie gras, duck confit, delicate towers of food Mark couldn't name. The group oohed and oohed, Vanessa orchestrating it all. Mark nursed his drink, the bar stool hard against his back, the chatter a dull roar in his ears. He caught snippets through the glass. Greg's booming laugh, Tara's shrill gossip, but it was Vanessa's voice that cut through, sharp and deliberate. She'd glance his way occasionally, her smirk a silent taunt. "You don't belong," and Emily, head bowed over her plate, didn't look up again. By the time the bill came, Mark's anger had hardened into something colder. He paid for his drink, tipped the bartender, and waited by the exit as the group spilled out, coats on, voices loud with wine. Emily approached, her steps hesitant. "You okay?" she asked, touching his arm. He pulled back slightly, meeting her eyes. "You too, me." Her face fell, but Vanessa swooped in before she could answer, linking arms with her. "Such a fun night. Mark, you were a trooper out there." She winked, steering Emily toward the valet. Mark watched them go, the knot in his chest twisting tighter. Vanessa had won this round, humiliated him, exposed a crack in his marriage, all without breaking a sweat. But as he followed them into the damp Seattle night, he knew one thing. He wasn't playing her game anymore. Not like this. And Emily? He'd deal with that at home. The drive home from Le Chen was silent, the hum of the car's engine filling the space where words should have been. Mark gripped the wheel, his knuckles white against the leather, the city lights streaking past like accusations. Emily sat beside him, her hands folded in her lap, her black dress still pristine despite the night's wreckage. She stared out the window, her reflection a ghost in the glass. And Mark could feel the weight of her embarrassment, but not her voice. Not yet. They reached their house, a modest two-story tucked into a quiet Seattle street, and stepped inside without speaking. Mark tossed his keys onto the counter with a clatter, the sound sharp in the stillness. Emily slipped off her heels, her bare feet padding toward the kitchen. "Want some water?" she asked, her tone too casual, like she was testing the air. Mark didn't answer. He leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching her fill a glass she didn't drink. "We need to talk," he said finally, his voice low but steady. Emily froze, her fingers tightening around the glass. She turned, meeting his eyes for the first time since the restaurant, and he saw it. Guilt, flickering like a shadow across her face. "About what?" she asked, but it was weak, a deflection. Mark's jaw clenched. "You know what?" She set the glass down, the clink echoing in the quiet. "Mark, I'm sorry about tonight. I didn't expect—" She stopped, biting her lip, and he stepped closer, cutting through her pause. "Didn't expect what, Em? That Vanessa would pull something like that? Or that you'd just stand there while she did—" His words landed hard, and she flinched, her shoulders hunching slightly. "That's not fair," she said, voice trembling. "It happened so fast, I didn't know what to do." "Didn't know what to do," he laughed, a short, bitter sound. "There were 8 seats, Emily, 8, and I wasn't one of them. She set it up and you let me walk away." And he paced to the living room, sinking onto the couch, his hands raking through his hair. The humiliation from the bar stool burned fresh. Vanessa's smirk, the group's silence, Emily's averted eyes. "I sat there like some outsider while you ate duck confit with her, and you didn't say a damn thing." Emily followed, hovering near the armchair, her arms wrapping around herself. "I was embarrassed, okay? I didn't want to make a scene. She caught me off guard. I thought you'd handle it." Her voice cracked, and Mark looked up, incredulous. Handle it? What was I supposed to do, Em? Drag a chair in and force my way to the table. She wanted me gone, and you didn't fight for me. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back, sinking into the chair. I didn't mean to abandon you. God, Mark. I didn't see it coming. Vanessa's never done that before, not like that. She hugged her knees, her voice dropping to a whisper. I froze. I'm sorry. Mark leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at her. You froze because you didn't want to lose them. Her. That whole crowd. Emily's head snapped up, her brows furrowing. That's not true, she started, but he held up a hand, cutting her off. It is, and you need to hear this. She's been doing this for years, little digs, leaving me out, making me the odd man out. Emily shook her head, but doubt crept into her expression, softening her defiance. She's my friend, Mark. She's been there for me since college. Through breakups, job hunts, everything. She wouldn't. She stopped, her gaze drifting to the floor. Mark seized the opening. Wouldn't what? Humiliate me to keep you in line? She's not your friend, Em. She's your puppet master. Look at tonight. She didn't even blink. She planned it, and you played along because you're scared of what happens if you don't. That's not fair, she said again, but it was weaker now, her hands twisting in her lap. I don't want to lose them. They're my people, my escape from sitting in that office all day staring at numbers. You've got your shop, your customers. I've got them. Her voice broke and a tear slipped down her cheek. If I push back, if I call her out, they're gone. Mark's anger softened, but only slightly. He crossed to her, crouching in front of the chair, his hands resting on her knees. You're not alone. You've got me. But I can't keep being the guy you leave at the bar because Vanessa snaps her fingers. I felt like nothing tonight, Em. Like I didn't matter to you. His voice cracked, and she looked at him, eyes wide with regret. You do matter, she whispered, reaching for his hand. I messed up. I should have said something. I should have told her to fix it. I didn't want to lose her. Mark squeezed her hand, his gaze steady. You're losing me instead. She's controlling you, and you don't even see it. The way she talks over you, picks who's in or out, she's not your friend, she's your boss. Emily pulled her hand back, wiping her face, her breath shaky. I don't know what to do about it. She's always been like this. I thought it was just her way. Mark stood, his resolve hardening. Then open your eyes. Watch her next time. See how she moves, how she uses people. I'm not asking you to ditch her tonight. I'm asking you to see her for what she is. Because I'm not doing this again. She nodded slowly, her expression torn but softening. Okay, I'll try. I'm so sorry, Mark. He stepped back, the tension still thick between them. I know you are, but sorry doesn't fix it. We've got to figure this out. Together. He turned toward the stairs, needing space, leaving her curled in the chair, staring at the floor. The night settled heavy over the house, the rift between them raw but cracked open for truth. Mark didn't know if she'd see Vanessa's game, but he'd planted the seed, and he wasn't backing down, not from Emily, not from this fight. The days after Le Chen stretched thin and quiet, a fragile truce settling over Mark and Emily's home. They moved around each other carefully, coffee brewed, dinners shared, but the air held an unspoken strain. Mark didn't push her again about Vanessa, not after their raw confrontation, but he watched her. Emily's silence were longer now, her glances heavier, like she was wrestling with something she couldn't yet name. He gave her space, trusting she'd see what he'd seen, hoping she'd choose them over the pull of that glittering circle. A week later, she broke the quiet. Mark was in the shop, sanding a bike frame, when Emily appeared at the doorway, her phone in hand. Vanessa's planning another dinner, she said, her voice tentative, almost testing. Mark set the sandpaper down, wiping his hands on his jeans, his pulse ticking up. Where? He asked, keeping his tone neutral. She hesitated, shifting her weight. Some new place downtown, Atlas, I think, next Friday. The whole group's going. He studied her, her bitten lip, the way her fingers tightened around the phone. You want to go? He asked. She met his eyes, then looked away. I don't know, after last time. She trailed off, and Mark saw it, the flicker of doubt he'd planted, warring with her old loyalty. She texted me this morning, all excited like nothing happened. Her voice softened. I keep thinking about what you said. Mark nodded, leaning against the workbench. Good. That's a start. He paused, weighing his next move. He could say no, draw a line, keep them both clear of Vanessa's orbit, but something shifted in him, a calm resolve, a need to see this through. Not just for Emily, but for himself. Tell her we're in, he said finally. Emily's head snapped up, surprise widening her eyes. Both of us? He asked, and he caught the faint hope in her tone. Yeah, both of us. He crossed his arms, his decision settling like a stone. I'm not hiding from her, Em. But I'm not fighting her either. Not yet. I want to watch, see what she does. You should too. Emily frowned, uncertain. You sure, after everything? He gave a small, tight smile. I'm sure. We go together? Or we don't go. Your call. She exhaled, nodding slowly. Okay, together, then? She tapped out a reply on her phone, her fingers hesitant but deliberate, and Mark felt a quiet surge of relief. It wasn't victory, but it was a step. The week crawled by, tension simmering beneath their routine. Emily was quieter, her glances at him laced with questions she didn't voice. Mark kept busy in the shop, his hands steady on tools while his mind turned over the plan. He wouldn't react this time, not with anger, not with retreat. He'd observe, let Vanessa play her hand and give Emily the chance to see it unfiltered. If she couldn't, he'd know where they stood, but he wasn't walking into Atlas blind. He'd be ready. Friday night arrived, the air crisp with early spring chill. Mark pulled on a dark button-down, skipping the tie this time, his jacket slung over his shoulder. Emily emerged in a navy dress, simple but sharp, her hair swept back. She looked at him, offering a small smile. You clean up nice, she said, and he chuckled, easing the knot in his chest. So do you. Ready? She nodded, linking her arm with his, and they headed out. The drive to downtown Seattle, a mix of quiet and resolve. Atlas was sleek and modern, exposed brick, dim lighting, a buzz of voices spilling from the bar. They stepped inside, and Emily's grip on his arm tightened as she scanned the room. There, she murmured, nodding toward a long table near the back. The group was already there. Greg, Claire, Tara, a few others, wine glasses in hand, laughter rolling. Vanessa stood at the head, her blonde hair catching the light, her red dress a bold slash against the muted decor. She spotted them, her smile flashing like a blade. Emily, Mark, you made it. Her voice carried, warm but edged, and Mark felt the familiar prickle of her gaze. He counted the chairs as they approached. 10 this time, a full set. No trap tonight, at least not the obvious one. Vanessa gestured to 2 empty seats near the end. Save you spots, wouldn't dream of a repeat, she said, her laugh light, her eyes locking on Mark's. He nodded, keeping his expression even. Appreciated. Emily slid into her chair and he took his, the group's chatter washing over them. Vanessa leaned in, her tone conspiratorial. I owe you an apology, Mark. Last time was a mess, total oversight. Forgive me? Her sincerity was flawless, but he saw the glint beneath it, the test. Water under the bridge, he said, his voice calm, giving her nothing. She held his gaze a beat longer, then turned to Emily, launching into a story about a client's meltdown. Mark settled back, sipping his drink, his senses sharp. He wasn't here to spar, not yet. He'd watch, wait, let Vanessa unfold her game. Emily's hand brushed his under the table, a silent tether, and he squeezed back. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. For now. The table at Atlas buzzed with the easy rhythm of a group well-practiced in its rituals. Clinking glasses, overlapping voices, the occasional burst of laughter. Mark sat at the end, his drink untouched, his eyes tracing the scene like a mechanic sizing up a machine. He'd come to watch, not to play, and Vanessa was the engine driving it all. She held court at the head of the table, her red dress a beacon, her voice cutting through the din with precision. Mark kept his expression neutral, but inside he catalogued every move. Vanessa leaned toward Greg, the lawyer, her hand resting lightly on his arm as she laughed at his joke, a loud, practiced guffaw that didn't quite match the punchline. You're terrible, she said, her tone teasing, but her grip lingered, anchoring his attention. Greg beamed, puffing up under her gaze, while Claire, the marketer, shifted in her seat, her smile tightening. Vanessa noticed. Mark saw it in the flicker of her eyes and pivoted smoothly. Claire, tell me about that pitch you nailed, she said, her voice warm, pulling Claire back into the fold. It was seamless, a dance of dominance masked as charm, and the group swayed to her rhythm. Mark sipped his water, glancing at Emily beside him. She was quieter tonight, her fork nudging her salad, her laughter delayed when it came. She'd caught Vanessa's apology earlier, too polished, too quick, and now her eyes darted between the table and Mark, like she was piecing something together. He squeezed her hand under the table again, a silent steadying, and she offered a faint nod. Good, she was watching too. Vanessa's game unfolded in layers. She wielded passive aggression like a scalpel, subtle cuts that left no blood but plenty of sting. When Tara, the socialite, gushed about a new art exhibit, Vanessa tilted her head, her smile thinning. Oh, that one? I heard it's more hype than substance. Perfect for Instagram, though. Tara faltered, her enthusiasm dimming, and Vanessa moved on, leaving the jab to fester. Mark noted the others' reactions. Greg's awkward chuckle, Claire's quick subject change. They felt it, the tension she ceded, but they didn't push back. They never did. The control was clearer now, sharper than at LaChain. Vanessa didn't just lead, she orchestrated. She'd asked Emily a question. "How's that big project going, Em?" Then cut her off mid-answer to pivot to Greg's latest case, her interruption so deft it felt natural. Emily shrank slightly each time, her words swallowed, and Mark's chest tightened. He saw the discomfort ripple beyond her too. Vanessa thrived on it, her power blooming in the unease she cultivated, keeping them all tethered to her approval. Halfway through the meal, the waiter brought a bottle of wine Vanessa hadn't ordered. A surprise from the house, she claimed, though Mark caught her wink at the server. She poured with flourish, skipping Tara's glass with a breezy, "Oh, you're not a red wine girl, right?" Tara blinked, caught off guard, and muttered, "I guess not," while Vanessa moved on, the slight landing like a pebble in a pond. Mark's jaw ticked. It wasn't random, it was calculated, a flex of control dressed as carelessness. He leaned back, piecing it together. Vanessa didn't just dominate, she manipulated the group's fault lines, praise here, a dig there, always keeping them off balance. Emily was her linchpin, the quiet one she could steer with a look or a laugh, and Mark was the threat she'd tried to exile at Lashane. Tonight, with him here, she was subtler, but the game hadn't changed. She'd apologized to disarm him, not to repent, and now she worked the table like a chessboard, testing his silence. Emily's glances grew more frequent, her brow furrowing as Vanessa steamrolled Claire's story with a louder one of her own. Mark caught her eye, tilting his head slightly. "See it?" And she gave a tiny troubled nod. She did. Not all of it, maybe, but enough. Her hand rested on his knee now, a small anchor, and he covered it with his own. The night wasn't over, but the shift was there, her conflict surfacing, her loyalty fraying at the edges. Vanessa noticed too. Her gaze flicked to Mark, sharp and fleeting, as she raised her glass for a toast. "To friends who keep us grounded," she said, her smile a challenge, her eyes locking on his. The group murmured agreement, glasses clinking, but Mark didn't move. He held her stare, calm and unyielding, letting her see he wasn't playing. She faltered. Just a second, a crack in her mask, then turned away, laughing too loudly at something Greg said. The meal wound down, plates cleared, voices softening with wine and fatigue. Mark stayed quiet, his observations stacking like bricks. Vanessa's dominance was a house of cards, impressive until you saw the flimsy base. The others felt it, their discomfort a quiet rebellion she couldn't quite stamp out. And Emily? Her hand stayed on his knee, her glances now steady with something new. Not defiance, not yet, but awareness. It was enough for tonight. As they stood to leave, Vanessa swept over, linking arms with Emily. "Such a good night, right?" she said, her tone bright, her grip possessive. Emily smiled faintly, but her eyes slid to Mark. "Yeah," she said, her voice soft but firm. "It was." Vanessa didn't catch the weight of it, but Mark did. He nodded at her, a silent promise. They'd talk later. For now, he'd seen what he needed, and so had she. The dinner at Atlas stretched into its final hour, the table littered with half-empty glasses and crumpled napkins. Vanessa held her perch at the head, her voice a steady current steering the conversation, but Mark felt the tide shifting. He'd watched her all night, her dominance, her jabs, the way she tightened her grip on the group, and he was done sitting idle. He wouldn't escalate, wouldn't give her the fight she might crave, but he'd make it clear. He saw her. And he wasn't bending. It started small. Vanessa leaned toward Emily, her tone dripping with faux concern. "Em, you've barely touched your dessert. You're not still stressing that project, are you?" The question was a hook, baiting Emily to shrink, to defer. Mark caught Emily's flicker of hesitation, her fork pausing midair. Before she could answer, he spoke, his voice steady and warm. He turned to her, his smile genuine, lifting her up without a trace of confrontation. Emily blinked, then nodded, a faint flush coloring her cheeks. "Yeah, I did. Took a while, but it's done." Vanessa's smile tightened, her eyes flicking to Mark, but he kept his gaze on Emily, giving her the floor. Claire, the marketer, chimed in. "That's awesome, congrats." Greg raised his glass, and the table murmured approval. Vanessa recovered quickly, laughing. "Well, aren't you the power couple tonight?" Her tone was playful, but Mark caught the edge, a test, probing his move. He didn't bite. "Just proud of her," he said, simple and firm, then took a sip of his water, letting the moment settle. Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly, but she turned back to Greg, launching into a story about a gala she'd attended. Mark stayed quiet, leaning in, not out of awe, he realized, but habit. His interruption had rippled, subtle but real, and he wasn't done. Later, as Tara gushed about a new boutique, Vanessa cut in with her signature jab. "Oh, Tara, it's cute you're so excited. Probably overpriced though, right?" Tara faltered, her smile dimming, and the table tensed, waiting for the usual silence to swallow it. Mark stepped in, his tone even. "Sounds like a smart find to me. Overpriced or not, you've got an eye for what works." He nodded at Tara, casual but deliberate, and she perked up, grinning. "Thanks, Mark. I think so too." Vanessa's laugh was quick, a little too sharp. "Well, aren't you the gentleman tonight?" she said, her gaze locking on his. He met it, unflinching. "Just calling it like I see it," he said. his voice calm, a quiet steel beneath it. She held his steer, her smile a mask, then turned away, tossing her hair as she pivoted to Claire. Mark exhaled, feeling the shift. He wasn't loud, wasn't aggressive, just present, steady, refusing to let her control the air unchecked. And the group felt it. The change was slow but tangible. Greg asked Mark about his shop, genuine this time, not the polite filler of past nights. You ever think about expanding? Bikes are big now. Mark shrugged, keeping it light. Maybe someday. For now, I like keeping it small. Lets me focus on the work. Greg nodded, impressed, and Claire jumped in. That's smart. Niche's where it's at. Vanessa stayed silent, her fingers tapping her glass, but Mark saw her watching, recalculating. Emily felt it too. Her hand brushed his under the table, lingering this time, and when he glanced at her, her eyes were bright, not with conflict now, but something closer to pride. She leaned in, whispering, "You're good at this." He squeezed her hand back, a small grin tugging at his lips. "Just being me," he murmured, and she smiled, a real one, the kind he hadn't seen all night. Vanessa tried to reclaim the reins, her voice rising as she recounted a dramatic client call, but the group's energy had shifted. Tara laughed at something Claire said, ignoring Vanessa's cue. Greg turned to Mark again, asking about a custom bike he'd built. Vanessa's story trailed off, her smile stiffening, and Mark caught the flash of frustration in her eyes. He didn't gloat, didn't need to. He'd countered her without raising his voice, without giving her a target to hit back at. Grace and firmness, just enough to crack her grip. As the night wound down, the group stood, stretching and gathering coats. Vanessa swept over, her arm looping through Emily's as usual, but her chatter felt forced. "Such a fun night, let's do it again soon," she said, her eyes darting to Mark. He nodded, polite but cool. "Sure, good to see everyone." His tone was neutral, but his stance said more, shoulders square, gaze steady. Vanessa's smile flickered. Then she turned away, steering Emily toward the door. Emily glanced back at him, her expression soft but sure, and Mark knew she'd seen it. The way he'd held his ground, the way the group had tilted just slightly toward him and her. He followed them out into the cool night, the buzz of Atlas fading behind. Vanessa might still have her hooks in, but they were loosening. The table had responded, not to a showdown but to something quieter, stronger. Respect, and Emily's quiet glances told him she felt it too. 2 weeks after Atlas, Vanessa struck again, her invitation landing like a velvet glove over a fist. Emily came home from a rare in-person meeting, her phone buzzing as she dropped her bag on the counter. "Osteria Bianca," she said, reading the text aloud, her voice a mix of excitement and unease. "Next Saturday, Vanessa's booked a private room. She says it's exclusive, just a few of us." Mark looked up from the stove, stirring a pot of sauce, his gut tightening. Osteria Bianca was Italian luxury, truffle-dusted pasta, wine lists longer than novels, a step up even from Le Chen. He set the spoon down. "She say who's invited?" Emily scrolled, her brow furrowing. "Me, Greg, Claire, and she's still finalizing, but she mentioned you, said you're welcome if you want to come." Her eyes met his, hesitant, searching. Mark leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "If I want to," he repeated, his tone dry. "Sounds familiar," Emily bit her lip, nodding. "I know. I told her we're a package deal." She didn't argue. He studied her, seeing the flicker of resolve beneath her nerves. "Good," he said. "Then we'll go." Saturday arrived, the air sharp with late spring chill. Mark pulled on a dark blazer, Emily beside him in a deep green dress, her movements quieter than usual. The drive to Osteria Bianca was tense, her fingers twisting in her lap. "You think she'll pull something?" she asked, voice low. Mark kept his eyes on the road. "Maybe, but we're ready either way." She nodded, a small smile breaking through. "Yeah. Together." He squeezed her hand, feeling the shift. She wasn't just along for the ride anymore. The restaurant glowed with understated elegance, soft lighting, white tablecloths, the hum of wealth in every clink of glass. They stepped into the private room, and there it was. Vanessa's trap, reset and gleaming. 5 chairs, 5 settings, 5 faces, Greg, Claire, Tara, and Vanessa, already seated mid-laugh. Vanessa rose, her black dress shimmering, her smile a perfect crescent. "Emily?" "Oh," and Mark, her voice lilted with that same mock surprise, her hand fluttering to her chest. "God, I did it again, 5 seats. These bookings are impossible, you know how it is." Mark's jaw tightened, but he stayed calm, his eyes scanning the table. Greg shifted uncomfortably, Claire glanced away, Tara froze mid-sip. Emily's grip on his arm stiffened, her breath catching. "Vanessa," she started, her voice shaky. "You said—" Vanessa cut her off, waving a hand. "No worries, Em, the bar's gorgeous here. Mark, you'll love it, right over there." She pointed. He didn't, not yet. He turned to Emily, his voice low. "You okay with this?" Her eyes flashed anger, not embarrassment, and she shook her head. "No." Before she could say more, Mark stepped forward, his posture relaxed but unyielding. Actually, Vanessa, I've got a better idea. He pulled out his phone, dialing a number he rarely used, his voice steady as he spoke. Hey, Luca, it's Mark Weston. Yeah, I'm at Osteria Bianca. Private room's a little tight. Can you move us to the owner's table? 5 minutes? Perfect. Thanks. The room went still. Vanessa's smile faltered, her head tilting. What's that about? She asked, her tone sharp now. Mark pucketed his phone, meeting her gaze. I'm a part investor in the chain, didn't I mention? They've got a bigger table upstairs, room for everyone. He gestured to the group. Let's go. Greg's eyebrows shot up. Claire's mouth parted, and Tara grinned, already standing. Emily stared at him, stunned but beaming, her hand finding his. Vanessa's face flushed, her composure cracking. You own part of this? She stammered, but Mark didn't linger on her shock. Silent partner, he said, casual but firm. Come on, they're setting it up. He led the way, Emily at his side, the group trailing behind. Vanessa followed last, her heels clicking hard against the floor, her silence louder than any protest. The owner's table was a sprawling oak slab on a private balcony, 6 chairs, 6 settings, no one left out. The staff bustled, pouring wine as the group settled, their chatter resuming with a new edge. Curiosity, maybe respect. Mark took his seat beside Emily, her hand resting on his knee, her eyes bright with something fierce. You didn't tell me, she whispered, and he grinned. Never grim up, figured it might tonight. Vanessa sat across from them, her smile rebuilt but brittle, her fingers drumming the table. Well played, Mark, she said, her voice tight, a concession she couldn't mask. He nodded, unruffled. Just making sure we all fit. The group laughed, Greg loudest, Claire joining in, and the night shifted. Vanessa tried to steer it back, her stories louder, her gestures sharper, but the table didn't bend to her like before. Mark had turned her game inside out, not with anger but with a quiet trump card, and she was reeling. Emily leaned into him as the meal ended, her voice soft. That was incredible. He squeezed her hand, feeling the weight lift. We're not done yet, he murmured, and she nodded, her resolve matching his. Vanessa's humiliation hung in the air, a crack in her armor Marked had widened, not for revenge but for truth. The night wasn't over, but the power had shifted, and they all knew it. The owner's table at Osteria Bianca hummed with the group's chatter, but beneath the clink of glasses and forced laughter, a current crackled. Vanessa sat rigid, her smile a thin veneer, her fingers tapping in unsteady rhythm on her wine glass. Mark's move had flipped the night, her exclusion undone, her control punctured, and Emily felt it like a jolt. She'd watched him turn the tables, calm and unshakable, and now her own silence from Le Chen burned in her chest. She squeezed his hand under the table, her resolve hardening. This ended tonight. As the group lingered over dessert, tiramisu dusted with cocoa, plates half cleared, Emily stood, her voice cutting through the buzz. Vanessa, can we talk? Outside. The table stilled. Greg's fork pausing mid-air, Claire's eyes widening. Vanessa blinked, her smile flickering, but she rose with a breezy laugh. Of course, Em, lead the way. Her tone was light, but her gaze darted to Mark, sharp and wary. Emily didn't look back as she stepped onto the balcony, Vanessa trailing her into the cool night air. The city sparkled below, a distant hum against the tension between them. Emily turned, her hands clenched at her sides. What was that tonight? She asked, her voice low but firm. Vanessa tilted her head, feigning confusion. What was what, the dinner? Mark's little surprise? She waved a hand, dismissive. It all worked out, didn't it? Emily shook her head, stepping closer. No, you've forgot a seat again. You did it on purpose, same as Le Chen. Why? Vanessa's laugh was sharp, brittle. Em, you're overreacting. It's just logistics. These places are a nightmare to book. I didn't mean anything by it. But her eyes betrayed her, narrowing as Emily held her ground. Don't lie to me, Emily said, her voice rising. You've been doing this for years, cutting him out, making him feel small. I didn't see it before, but I do now. You're not my friend. You're controlling me. The words hit like stones, and Vanessa's mask slipped, her smile twisting into something colder. Controlling you? Please. I've been there for you. College, breakups, all of it. Mark's the one who doesn't fit. I'm just managing the dynamic. She shrugged, as if it were obvious, but Emily's chest tightened, the truth snapping into focus. Managing me, she said, almost a whisper. You decide who's in, who's out, what I should want. That's not friendship. That's power. Vanessa stepped back, her heels clicking, her composure fraying. You're twisting this. I've given you everything, my circle, my time. Emily cut her off, her voice steady now. No, you've taken. Loyalty's supposed to go both ways, and you've never given it back. I'm done. She turned, walking back inside, leaving Vanessa frozen on the balcony, her silhouette stark against the city light. Mark stood as Emily returned, his brow furrowing at her expression. Anger, relief, a raw edge of clarity. She crossed to him, ignoring the group's curious glances, and took his hands. "Can we go home?" she asked, her voice soft but urgent. He nodded, grabbing their coats, and they left without a word, the door closing on Vanessa's fractured rein. At home, Emily sank onto the couch, her hands trembling as she faced Mark. "I'm so sorry," she said, tears brimming. "I didn't see it. How she used me. How I let her hurt you. LaChain, tonight. I should have stood up sooner." Mark sat beside her, his hand covering hers, warm and steady. "You saw it now," he said, his tone gentle. "That's what matters." She shook her head, wiping her eyes. "It's not enough. You were right. She's been pulling strings forever. And I was too scared to lose her. I let you down." He tilted her chin up, meeting her gaze. "You didn't lose me. You're here, and you faced her. That's not weak." She leaned into him, her voice breaking. "I choose you, Mark. Every time in weeks." The air felt clear. The weeks after Osteria Bianca felt like a thaw, the tension that had gripped Mark and Emily's home melting into something warmer, stronger. The kitchen table became their anchor again. Coffee in the mornings, dinners shared over stories that flowed easier now. Mark noticed the shift in Emily first, her shoulders looser, her laughter quicker, her eyes meeting his without the shadow of doubt. She'd cut Vanessa loose, and with that choice she'd chosen them. Fully, fiercely. He felt it too, a quiet trust rebuilding, deeper than before. They started small. One evening, Mark closed the shop early and Emily suggested takeout, pizza from a hole in the wall they'd loved in their early days. They ate on the couch, legs tangled under a blanket, trading bites and memories. "Remember when we got lost biking that trail?" she asked, grinning. He laughed, nodding. "You swore we'd end up in Canada. I had to bribe you with coffee to keep going." She nudged him, her warmth pressed against his side, and he pulled her closer, the ease of it grounding him. It wasn't just nostalgia, it was them, rediscovering the rhythm they'd almost lost. The void Vanessa left didn't stay empty long. Mark invited Luca, Osteria Bianca's manager, and his wife Sofia over for drinks one night. Luca's easy humor, stories of restaurant chaos paired with Sofia's sharp wit, filled the house with laughter. Emily clicked with them instantly. Her data-driven mind sparring with Sofia's tales of teaching high schoolers. "You'd have hated me as a student," Emily teased. And Sofia grinned. Mark watched, his chest life. New voices, new bonds, no strings attached. Then came Sarah, a regular at Weston's Wheels who'd always lingered to chat about her vintage Schwinn. Mark mentioned her to Emily and soon she was over for dinner, bringing a bottle of wine and a dry humor that matched Emily's. "Vanessa would have hated her," Emily whispered to Mark later, smirking, and he chuckled. "Good thing she's not here." Sarah fit effortlessly unpretentious kind, asking Mark about his builds and Emily about her work with genuine curiosity. The group grew organically, a mix of Luca, Sofia, Sarah, and a few others. People who didn't orbit a single star but shared the space equally. Emily reflected on it one night, curled against Mark in bed, the room dark except for the glow of streetlights through the blinds. "I didn't realize how much she took," she said, her voice soft. "Vanessa, I mean. Every dinner, every call, it was about her, not us. I thought I needed that, her approval, that crowd. But this," she gestured vaguely at the house, the life they were building, "this is better." Mark traced circles on her arm, listening. "Letting go's hard," he said. "You did it anyway." She nodded, her head resting on his chest. "I was scared I'd lose everything, friends, that escape. But I didn't. I gained more. You stuck with me through it, even when I was blind." He tilted her face up, kissing her forehead. "Always will. You're worth it." She smiled, her eyes crinkling, and he felt the past weeks, the fights, the silences, fade into something healed. Their days settled into a new normal. Mark's shop thrived, customers drawn by his quiet skill and the occasional tale of his Osterio coup. Luca had spread the word, grinning every time. Emily's work steadied too, her remote hours less isolating now that she had Sarah to text, or Sofia to grab coffee with. They hosted dinners, messy, loud affairs with mismatched chairs and too much food, laughter echoing where Vanessa's shadow once loomed. Mark caught Emily watching him during those nights, her gaze soft, and he'd pull her close, the connection unspoken but solid. One afternoon, as spring tipped into summer, Emily stood in the shop, leaning against his workbench. "I used to think toxic was loud obvious," she said, her voice thoughtful. "But it's not. It's quiet, sneaky, like her. I'm glad I saw it." Mark wiped grease from his hands, stepping over. "Took guts to walk away. I'm proud of you." She smiled, tugging him into a hug. "Couldn't have done it without you." Their bond felt forged anew, stronger, tempered by the fire they'd walked through. They weren't perfect, but they were honest, and the friends they'd found reflected that. People who respected them, not their roles in someone's game. Emily had let go of the toxic and Mark had stood firm, and together they'd built something better. The past was a lesson, not a chain, and as summer stretched ahead, they faced it hand in hand. Summer settled over Seattle, warm and golden, and Mark and Emily's home glowed with the light of a new chapter. The dining room, once a quiet space for two, now brimmed with life. A long table stretched across it, borrowed chairs squeezed tight, plates piled with grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, and Sarah's slightly lopsided homemade bread. The air smelled of garlic and laughter, voices weaving together in a hum that... Mark leaned back in his seat, his arm draped over Emily's chair, watching the scene with a quiet contentment he hadn't known he'd been missing. Luca stood at one end, gesturing wildly as he recounted a kitchen disaster at Osteria Bianca, something about a flaming dessert and a panicked sous chef. Sophia rolled her eyes beside him, tossing in dry jabs that sent the table into fits of laughter. Sarah rose-cheeked her glass, grinning at Mark across the table as she added, "Sounds like my kind of chaos." A few others, Jake, a mechanic from the shop, and his girlfriend Mia, a nurse with a sharp wit, chimed in with their own stories, the room alive with easy camaraderie. No one dominated, no one excluded, just friends, real ones, who filled the space with respect and warmth. Emily sat beside Mark, her navy blouse catching the candlelight, her laughter bright as she nudged him. "You're quiet tonight," she teased, her hazel eyes crinkling. He grinned, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Just taking it in. This is better than I ever thought it'd be." She leaned into him, her hand finding his under the table, their connection a steady pulse beneath the night's joy. They'd come through Vanessa's shadow, her games, her control, and landed here, stronger, more in sync than ever. The plates emptied, the wine flowed, and as the chatter softened, Emily stood, raising her glass. The room hushed, all eyes on her, but there was no tension, only anticipation. "I want to say something," she began, her voice clear, steady. "A few months ago, I didn't know what real friendship looked like or real loyalty. I was stuck in something toxic and I almost lost what mattered most." She glanced at Mark, but we got through it, together. And now we're here, with all of you, true friends. So here's to new beginnings, built on respect. She lifted her glass higher, and the table erupted, cheers, clinks, a chorus of, "To new beginnings." Mark stood too, his glass in hand, his voice warm as he added, "And to Emily, for seeing it, choosing us, and making this possible." Her cheeks flushed, but she smiled, radiant, and they drank, the toast sealing the night. The group joined in, glasses raised high, Luca shouting to Mark's secret restaurant empire, and the laughter rolled again, free and full. As the evening wound down, people lingered, Sophia helping Emily clear plates, Jake and Mark debating bike gears by the door. The house felt alive, not with Vanessa's polished veneer, but with something raw, honest. Mark pulled Emily close as the last guests waved goodbye, her head resting against his chest. "We did it," she murmured, and he kissed her forehead, his voice low. "Yeah, we did. Love you, Em." She tilted her face up, kissing him softly. "Love you too." The door closed, the quiet settling, and they stood together, hands linked, the echoes of the night wrapping around them. Their relationship tested, tempered, was stronger than ever, a bond forged in trust and rebuilt with care. The toast lingered in the air, a promise kept, new beginnings built on respect with each other and the life they'd chosen. They turned off the lights, climbed the stairs, and slipped into bed, more in love, more themselves, ready for whatever came next.